Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video on what may be the final morning of whether or not we get a Brexit deal, I may as well take a last look, or maybe a penultimate look, or maybe not the last look at all because it will keep dragging on, at the do they or don't they want to deal with the EU, and did they really believe that the EU would blink at the negotiating table. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So just to begin with, people may be expecting me to talk about Johnson's latest U-turn yesterday with regards to the COVID arrangements. That will be coming second. I wanted to do the Brexit one first, and I was discussing yesterday, I think, that I've been convinced for a month or so now that Boris Johnson wants a deal. I'm not going to go over that. This isn't really about whether or not Boris Johnson wants a deal. I'm happy that he does. It's more about other stakeholders, because you might reasonably wonder if Boris Johnson wants a deal, as I strongly believe he does, and he would easily get a deal through Parliament. He'd easily get the votes needed. Why hasn't he already settled it, therefore? Now, the reason is, I think, and there are a few possible reasons, but the reason I think is because he wants a critical mass of Conservative MPs to support it. Certainly, he'll definitely have enough to get it voted through, even if Labour abstain, even though at the moment Labour are talking very much in terms of supporting it. But that's not enough. Bear in mind that both Theresa May and Boris Johnson had to march to the beat of the drum of little more than a third of Conservative MPs representing the hardline Brexiteers over the past few years. Not all of them are as extreme as each other, but even together they have never represented a majority of the parliamentary Conservative Party. But they can represent a large enough bloc to cause a damaging split in the party. And Conservatives understand the damage that splits cause, unlike, unfortunately, Labour. This is why they win so many elections when they are fundamentally at odds with the vast majority of the British population. They understand that unity is strength, and also that this gives them an advantage because their opponents frequently have public squabbles, which plays out very poorly in the public's perception. I think the only reason we haven't confirmed a deal yet, assuming that that's still the case as this video comes out, but as I'm doing this fairly late on Saturday evening and it'll be coming out first thing on Sunday, I think it's fair to say that's still the case. I think it's because Boris Johnson doesn't feel he has enough Tory MPs on his side. There's another possibility. It could be argued that he's struggling to keep up with both Brexit and COVID at the same time. Like I said, yesterday, he was obviously very much involved in COVID. He's had to make his sudden U-turns. It could well be that today he was going to be focusing on Brexit and that didn't happen. Each of these events distracts from the other for a Prime Minister who is known for being very poorly organised. And it might well be that as a result of that, we end up not agreeing a deal that we otherwise might have done later today, just because COVID has occupied his attention now. What I'm curious about, really, though, is what Johnson would need to persuade them. If indeed I'm right about this and what he wants is a certain number of Tory MPs to support his deal, what is it that he needs to do to persuade them? Because, for example, we're told that the main sticking point now is fishing. I mean, if that's true, then Boris Johnson has already agreed in principle the issues of, for example, the level playing field, dispute resolution, and encompass within that state aid rules. If fishing is the outstanding issue, it's not because it's important to anyone involved on our side, but because it's been used to distract the general population. You know, like using a laser pen to distract a kitty. Johnson clearly wants something that he can sell as a great victory on the what he would see as the relatively insignificant area of fishing, to convince everyone that he's beaten the EU down and gotten us a great deal. But is it that he needs to persuade MPs or their constituents? You know, is he currently having trouble getting enough MPs on board because the deal doesn't satisfy their Brexit ideology? Or is it because those MPs aren't sure that it will satisfy the Brexit expectations of their voters? Now, I'm not sure. On the one hand, although there are definitely significant numbers of Tory MPs who have a zealotry towards their ideas of Brexit, I think most just like being MPs. They see it as a cushy number and they'd like to continue their future as an MP. Let's face facts, most Tory MPs would be unemployable in any other scenario. So is it just their constituents? Is it that you've got a load of Tory MPs who will be fine with anything, but they're just thinking, well, I'm not sure my voters would be happy with this? Again, I think any deal could be sold as a great deal to the general population, but the thing I would think of at this point is MPs are very likely to be worried about Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage, of course, will convince a lot of their common supporters that the deal is bad. Now, bear in mind, at the last general election, Farage pulled all Brexit Party candidates from existing Tory seats. And you can see exactly what happened, because he didn't pull them from other seats. As a result of Brexit Party candidates sitting in a number of other seats, it actually cost the Conservative MPs, I worked out, somewhere between 20 and 30. In other words, it would have been it was already an emphatic win for the Conservatives. It would have been much more so, and a real bloodbath for Labour had the Brexit Party pulled all their candidates. So they're worried at the next general election that Farage won't do this at all, that he will actually oppose the Conservatives, he will actually field candidates in all seats. And they're looking at the situation thinking this could lose me my seat, even if at the moment it's relatively safe. You split that vote. And because they'll know what Nigel Farage's response is going to be. It's completely predictable, utterly predictable. If the government gets a deal, he will attack it as a terrible deal. And he'll point out all of the deficiencies and how it doesn't do what was promised in the manifesto. And you know what? He won't even need to lie about that. He'll throw some lies in anyway, in the nature of the man. But he won't actually need to lie to point out how the deal that Boris Johnson gets and these Conservative MPs vote is not what was promised. He'll call it a Brexit in name only, But if the government don't agree a deal, well, Nigel Farage will attack that as well. He will attack the inevitable resulting mess as incompetence on the part of the government. He may even attack them for not getting a good deal. He may even said, well, we absolutely could have got a good deal. He may not even say that the chaos is just down to a poor Brexit, that actually, we should have got a good deal and he would have absolutely got a good deal. Now, in the first case, if he just points out the mess and says it's caused by incompetence, again, he won't need to lie. If he says that we could have got a better deal, that will be a bit of a lie. But he doesn't care about lying. Either outcome poses problems, of course, in a future general election if Nigel Farage, this time in his new party, Reform UK, I believe it's going to be called, actually fields candidates. And it's possible that MPs are not sure which one is politically worse for them. I imagine that is the real Brexit debate going on amongst those who now have it in their power to either accept or decline a deal this year. And they really don't have very long to do it. Then there's the other part of me that wonders if even at this late stage, is it that Boris Johnson and his Brexit conspirators still believe the EU are going to blink? I've said before that the EU's continued willingness to keep talking can only reinforce that suggestion. They may have imagined if the EU was serious about, allowing us to leave the transition period without a deal, that they would have just gone, right, do you know what, we ain't got a deal in time, let's call it quits, shall we? And in some ways it may have been better for them to have just walked away and to tell us to come back when we were prepared to be a bit more grown up about the negotiations. But they've not chosen to do that. Partly because all the deadlines are phony anyway. They're all Boris Johnson's deadlines, really. As far as they're concerned, much easier trade deals than this have taken years. We've barely started negotiating, really. But does the EU's willingness to carry on, or reluctance to call an end to it, as would be seen, does it give Johnson the impression that they are willing to remove one of their red lines in return for a deal, that they're so desperate for a deal that actually, if he just sits on his hands, they will give in on something. And he may imagine that fishing is the thing they'll do. Now, recently, Michel Barnier said this in the last day or so. He said, it would be neither fair nor acceptable that European fishermen have only transitory rights which evaporate one day in British waters, whilst all the rest of the agreement, notably for British companies, remains stable. Now, that was a very telling statement because it suggests that Boris Johnson's team is trying to make a special exception for this tiny but political important sliver of our economy, fishing. Boris Johnson wants fishing to be treated completely differently to any other industry. Now, they won't get this. Johnson can absolutely get something on fishing that is fundamentally different to how it was arranged as EU members. Absolutely. And he can sell that as a victory. No problem at all. But he won't get this. If he wants fishing to be completely different, he will not get that. The question is, when will he realise this? Has he already realised it? Is it really a case of him trying to persuade enough Tory MPs of this? Or does he still think that the EU may back down on it? Because, you know, before the practical deadline for a deal in this time passes, which, you know, of course, I mean, I don't know exactly when it is. Like, the EU Parliament say it's midnight tonight. France say, well, actually, it could probably go a bit longer. I was quite happy to believe it was weeks ago to get something in place by the end of this year at least. So who knows? But we get to a certain point where he has to realise it. Even if that certain point, you know what, is the 1st of January, what will he do then? You know, is he just pitching to get what he can, but has essentially decided that he has enough party support for the deal as it stands? If so, I think we will see an announcement of a deal agreed, you know, today, tomorrow, I suppose. Parliament will then need to get ready to ratify a major trade agreement, the most serious thing it's needed to ratify for a couple of generations, with basically next to no time to actually read the bloody thing. In fact, I gather the latest government plans, I thought it was going to be 2 days Parliament would get. It's actually, well, technically it's 2, but it's going to be 1 day for the House of Commons and another day for the House of Lords, and that's it. It's going to be rushed through like that. Now, bear in mind that some Tory Brexiteers claimed that they didn't understand the relatively simple withdrawal agreement when they had much longer to read it. Ian Duncan Smith, for example, one classic one, saying, we didn't really get time to read it. He was the one who was calling for even less time to read it. They had weeks to read that. Weeks. He was the one calling for it to be rushed through in 3 days. But apparently even weeks wasn't enough. Well, imagine what's going to happen in a year's time when some of them realise what's in the content of this thing that they vote through after they've only been given 24 hours to read it. That's for those who bother to read it at all, which will be almost none of them. But if Johnson thinks that he needs this impossible fishing concession to win over enough Conservative MPs, if he wants the deal, but he thinks, right, at the moment I'm not selling it to enough of my MPs, I need this thing, but of course he can't get this thing, and what does he do? He then has a choice. He can take the agreement anyway and just have to deal with the party infighting later, or he can turn down the agreement and then deal with the consequences of that in a few weeks' time. But that's how it seems to be set up for later today. Like I said, there's an awful lot of people anticipating, I wouldn't say expecting at this point. I think anyone expecting anything at this point hasn't been paying attention, but anticipating something. I mean, it is only a few days before Christmas after all, and it's got to get through Parliament. Santa Johnson is already bringing us border chaos. Will he also be bringing us crippling tariffs for many businesses as well? As well as, of course, a continuing fractious relationship with our best allies, as recriminations will inevitably begin in the event of a no-deal Brexit. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.